Welcome GRD 132, Typography 1 to exercise 14, and this is going to be RWD, Responsive Web Design, and we're going to do this with our Pilsner article that we worked on in exercise 13 when we were working with Web Type. So we're going to do one more thing with our Pilsner, and then we'll move on to something else. But all we're going to do with this is make some typography changes, and here's a sample, and we're just going to make this blue. And we're going to make this a little bigger and make the line spacing or the line height a little bit bigger or a little deeper so that it looks like more of an introduction before we get into the regular article. And then we'll color this. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger and increase the line height or the line spacing. And also this is in our Source Serif Pro. We're going to put this back in Source Sans at a smaller size. It might look better on a smaller size using the Source Sans. Especially on a mobile device, it would probably look better. So we're going to just make some small changes to this with the typography, and that's not really the responsive design. What the responsive design will do is if we change the size of this window, you read about how one of the factors when you deal with web typography is the device size or the window. If you resize this and make it smaller, we have set margins on there of 200. Now, that'll make our line spacing get shorter, which is good. But then it's going to get too short and we're going to have a lot of space on the side. Those 200 pixels are going to be too much. So at some point, we're going to want to change that. Now, how do you change that? Well, we use responsive web design. And then even as it gets smaller for like a phone, we even want to go down and take it even smaller. So when it gets down to where it's more like a phone device, we'll even make it smaller. So we're basically, for responsive web design here, we're not going to worry about changing the font sizes yet, but we'll just work on the margins. That's all we'll do, and we'll use something called W3 Schools, and we'll use something called media queries where we could just basically put in a breakpoint and say, okay, at 768, which is about the size of an iPad mini, we're going to change the margin. And then at something like 480, the size of like an iPhone, we're going to change the margin. So that's what we're going to do here. And let me just point out something. This is a finished version, but this is all we're going to do for the code. After we just make some minor changes, I think we're going to make a class so that the paragraph intro is a little bit different. We're going to do a couple typography changes to our original Pilsner one, so hopefully you finish that. And then we'll do some media queries, and that's all it's going to be. It's basically going to be a separate little statement here in curly braces and then styles in curly braces. So you have to have double curly braces just so you're aware of that. So you have to know that this is the media query beginning, then you're going to put styles in there which are going to change, and all we're going to do is just change the margins, and we don't even need this background color in here anymore. You only have to put in what's going to change. So we're just going to change the margins on the left and right, and that's all we're going to do. So let's get to it. And what you can do is actually fork your original one and make it 14 just so you have a different one. So you have your original 13 one that you did, and we're going to fork it. So I'm going to do that with you coming up. So what you're going to do first is open up your 13 Pilsner that you worked on before this assignment. So this is from Unit 10. So you're going to open up your 13 Pilsner and you're going to fork it. So make sure you open this up and make sure you did it. What you want to do is come to here where it says 13 Pilsner, whatever you named it, and I'm going to fork it. Now there's no fork button here. Now to fork your own, not one of mine, you have to go to these three dots and just go to fork, and now you can just call it 14. So just change that to 14, that's all you have to do. And if you want to put like a dash RWD, you could do that because we're doing responsive, just so you know this one is the responsive one. And I'll hit fork. And now what I want to do is open this up in a new window. And that's what I finished up with. And that's what you should have finished up with. And we'll make a couple changes to this. I think I'll make this bigger, and I'll change this to a sans serif and put some color in here. We'll do that first. So let's just do a couple things just to review. I'll move this over, and I'll keep these open so I could go back and forth between index and styles. And what I'll do first is just change the headline color. I'll make that a nice blue so that it contrasts nice. Instead of just black and this antique white, I'll make this blue, and maybe I'll make this like that amber kind of color, that brownish orangey kind of color. So I'll go to my H1 and I'll find my H1. That's the large headline. That's this. And I could go in any of these here, and I'll just hit enter, and I'll put color. That's all you have to do. Color. And if you just want to select color, it'll put the colon and the semicolon, and then I'm just going to put blue and hit enter. Now I don't want this blue because it's going to be too blue. It's going to be a little harsh. So I'm going to tone it down, and you can click right on this thing, and to tone it down, just kind of move it more grayish, more darker. That's all I want. Kind of over here it goes lighter, down here it goes darker, and it kind of loses its saturation over here. So I'm going to go down kind of less saturated and a little bit darker, like that. Kind of a grayer blue. And I'll refresh it, and that looks a little better, maybe even too grayer. Maybe I'll give it a little more color. I'll give it a little more saturation. All right, that looks better. And then I'll make these kind of that orangey color. Now what are these? These are your H2s. So I'll go down to the H2s, and I'll go here, and I'll make color, and I'll just select color, and I'll just put orange. And I don't want them orange, but I'll go into my orange, and I'll make it kind of a brown. Something like that. If you want it more reddish, you could go over a little bit and find something nice in there. That would be more of an analogous color with this, because it's kind of in that family somewhat. It's probably somewhere up here in that family. And I'll hit enter, and there, they're kind of a brown color. So that kind of works. An analogous color, kind of a contrasting warm cool with your background. And a couple other things we'll do here is I'll make this paragraph, I want this a little bigger, and I want the line height a little bit more. So where is that? Well, that's actually a P. Now, the problem is, if I change that, if I say, oh, I want it bigger, I want the font size instead of 110%, I want it 130%, and if I want the line height 160%, if I did this, if it does it to this, that's kind of the way I want it, that looks pretty good, but then it changes these, and I don't want to change these. I may want to change them, but I may not want them as big. So what do I do here? Now, let me just go back and put it what it was. So I'll go back and put this back at 110. So how do I make them different? Because they're all paragraphs, and I'm targeting paragraphs. Well, what I can do is do something called a class. And I think we did that in the other video. I'm going to go here, and for this paragraph, not the others, just this paragraph here, I'm going to go in here right after the P and put a space, and then put class, or two S's, equals, and then in quotes, just call it something. I'll call it intro. Don't put any capital letters or anything. So there's P space, and then class equals intro. Now if you didn't have a space here, that's okay. If that space wasn't there, but you need a space after the P, or it'll just be P class. It won't know what it is. So it has to be P with the class name of intro. And nothing will change right now. You're just giving this a special name. This paragraph is special. So when I go back to my styles, I can basically make a style for the special one. Actually, we did that with source already. So we did that with this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go p.intro and make a style or a declaration block, and I'll copy all of this stuff in here. Now I don't need it all, but I'm going to copy it all in. So right now they're the same, except now I can change this one. And I think what I'll do is I'll leave source serif pro there, and I'll change this to 160, and I'll change this to like 130. So I'll make it bigger, about 20% bigger, and I'll make it about 20% of the line height. And that's only for the intro, so the other P should stay the same. So because it'll inherit everything from the P. Let's see what this looks like. Now this looks the same. Now these are smaller. And I actually think I might want this in a sans serif. And I actually might want these a little bigger too. So just a couple things I'll do here. And if I want the H2s a little bigger, I don't have a size here. So what I can do with the H2, since I don't have a size, it's just using the default, which is like 1.5. What you could do with the H2 is do font size, and I'm going to put 2M. Or you could put 200%. Since we're using percents, let's just stay with the percents right now until we get into M's a little more. We'll put 200%. And let's just see what that looks like. I like that. That looks a little better. This seems a little smaller. I'm going to put this in a sans serif. And I think we have a sans serif, this same one, this source sans, because this is serif source serif, I think. And now watch this. This is a little tricky. So for my regular P now was in source serif. If I don't want that to be in source serif anymore, I can basically delete that because I still want my P intro in source serif. Remember, serif is the way it is now. That has the little serifs on it. But this one, I want this to be like that, except not bold. So what I'm going to do is delete that, and I actually have Source Sans Pro right here. So I'm going to copy it right from the H2, copy this one, and I'll put it right here for the P. So now the paragraphs will be in a sans serif, Source Sans, and then Calibri, if it doesn't work or doesn't load, it'll use Calibri. Now I just want to show you something. So I made that Source Sans. It's not bold or anything like that, and I'll refresh it. Now why is that bold? The reason that's bold is because when we chose the Google fonts, we didn't choose a regular version. And usually I'll tell you to do that, but we only chose bold for the headline. So we don't have a regular version. Now, instead of going back to Google Fonts, can we fix that? Yeah. Let's see this thing up here. Now you're going to look at this and go, like, what is this? How am I supposed to read that? But if you go in and you see Source Sans Pro, it says weight 700, and then it says end family. Well, end family actually starts the next one. So then it says Source Serif Pro, Pro weight, and then end, there's something else. So end is like a divider. So what you could do is look at ones that have two weights. Source Serif has two weights, 400 and 700. What divides them? The semicolon. There's a semicolon. So if you just put at 700 or even put the 400 first, if you actually did this, if you actually copied this at 400 colon 700, or just put this here, or just put here 400 semicolon. That's all you have to do. Just put 400 semicolon. That should give you a 400 version of that. And without specifying anything, it should use it, because we didn't specify anything. It should use it. Well, we actually we do. We have it right here. So let's see if that helps. And it helps. Fixes it. That's what we want. That's exactly what I want. Matter of fact, I even want the leading a little bit more. I'm going to make the line height 150. And I like that a little bit better. So this is my intro paragraph. This is Source Sans Pro. This is Source Sans Pro, the bold version, 700. This is 400. And again, to get 400, since we didn't have it with our Google, we just put it right here. We just put at 400 and a semicolon between that. So these things are how you have multiple fonts. You put them with at is how the weights start, and then semicolon divides different weights. So if you wanted a 300, you could put 300 and then a semicolon. And then if you wanted to specify a 300, you could go down here and see if it'll use a 300, a lighter one. Let's just see, just for the hell of it. And you can see that's really light. Now that's too light. We don't want that, but we can do that. So I'm just going to get rid of this because we don't need that. But start with the at sign, 400, and then semicolon, 700. That's how we do that. That's how we get more, instead of going back to Google Fonts and copying this thing all over again. If you just kind of follow how it works, as long as you had two weights, then you could kind of figure it out. So I'm going to go back here and put this at 400, and this is the way we want it. And that's all we need to do right now. And what we're going to do next in part 2 is actually do the responsive web design. Now, let me just mention this first. We're going to change this so that when it gets to a certain breakpoint, it's going to change the margin and use less of a margin. So how do you know what you're at here yet? One thing you can do is if you right-click on here and use Inspect, you'll get this thing down here. Now, we can look at this at some point, but right now you can move this down a little just using this little divider. But as you start moving it, when Inspect's on, it'll tell you your window size up here, if you can see it showing. Now, when I get to like maybe 768, that's like an iPad mini, that would be a good time to break it because there's a lot of space here. It's almost as much as the column itself. So once we get to 768, that's probably a good time to break it. You could break it at any time, but we could use that. And we'll break it and maybe split this in half so that we don't have to have such a short line length here for this stuff, because that's getting kind of narrow. That's not too bad, but we'll maybe split it in half. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll do that in part 2, but we're going to do a break at 768, and then we'll do one maybe at you can see when you get to 500, you really want to change this. So then we'll do one at maybe like 480. So we'll do 2 breakpoints. We'll use W3 schools and get the code from there and just adapt that. So that won't take that long. So we're going to do that in part 2.